You think back to Donald Trump's many problems with federal probes. There was the Mueller probe, which got a lot of his people in trouble, but ultimately, quite carefully and fairly, issued a report that did not seek his indictment in office under the sitting rules and didn't necessarily give a path to indicting him after office. Indeed, as you may recall, nothing from the Mueller report ever led to a Trump indictment. What did lead to it was conduct by Donald Trump, including the attempted stealing and overthrowing of the 2020 election and the January 6th insurrection, which Trump, of course, later tied himself even closer to by pardoning all the people convicted. That is the context for what's happening now. Trump said that he might want revenge. He might want, if he won, to use the powers of the government to go after the prosecutors who investigated him. That alone is a confession. That's an admission of an illicit goal. Sometimes that's called selective prosecution. It's what happens in other non-democracies, of course, all the time. The leader controls the Justice Department, or their version of it, calls up, like Putin would, and says, I want this or that enemy prosecuted. It's all rigged. So it is suspicious at a minimum, and disturbing according to many critics, that tonight we can report that federal officials are launching a type of probe into Jack Smith, the special counsel who indicted Donald Trump twice and then followed the law when the Supreme Court slowed the process down. And Smith ultimately dissolved those cases because of those rules I mentioned, that Trump was returning to office, so you couldn't go on with the prosecution of the head of state. Now, a different office, which is an independent agency, it's a watchdog that's unrelated to Smith and the DOJ, is now responding to politicians in the Republican Party, including Senator Cotton, who basically said maybe Smith's entire special counsel probe was a campaign effort, a political effort, and thus maybe it violates some workplace rule. Now, putting aside the irony of a sitting politician trying to be the one accusing other people of politics, this non-criminal probe is now proceeding. So it is a way to sort of add smoke and interference with Jack Smith. And if it follows Trump's goals, and we haven't had a direct connection, but we're also not going to close our eyes to the obvious, it is one more effort in this time of autocratic crackdowns, of business shakedowns and censorship, to send a message to other people in the government, hey, be careful going too hard at the president or his friends, or you might end up in a range of problems, expensive problems. Could be private lawsuits, could be this Hatch Act review, could be a criminal probe, as some Democratic officials are facing. Now, it's a civil offense even if you're found to violate the Hatch Act, and in Washington it's happened before. The investigation, though, could also be used as a kind of a step, or what lawyers call a pretext, to then get more intel or info on Smith and other people who worked with him to cook up other problems for them. The Post reports the investigation into Smith is out of the norm for an office responsible that looks into federal employees' violations of prohibited personnel practices. But this is a different type of era. And Trump himself has admitted to the illicit goals of punishing and investigating anyone he views as critical. Could be sitting office holders, could be former officials like Comey and Smith, John Brennan. Now, remember, this all started with the person in the federal government who, unlike many before him, said that when he found criminal evidence of wrongdoing, didn't matter if it was a powerful person like Trump, he was going forward.
Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with felony violations of our national security laws, as well as participating in a conspiracy to obstruct justice. Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding.
That was the case. There was strong evidence. And remember, one of the key defenses, and defendants are allowed, of course, to make defenses, was that Donald Trump, his lawyer said, did not want a violent insurrection or sedition, did not operationally plan it, and certainly didn't look at the worst of the worst, the people attacking cops and going into those hallowed halls of Congress, didn't look at them as his allies. They were people who got, as we heard, out of control in a day of riot. You probably remember many of the defenses. But what's happened from then to now has only gone in favor of the case that Mr. Smith was bringing, even though under the rules he wasn't going to bring it once Donald Trump became president-elect. because as president in round 2, second term, Trump pardoned all those people, which makes him look very supportive and completely endorsing of the convicted sedition, of the battery against police, of the effort to end American democracy when he found that it ran against him because he was the loser of the election. And now in this season where, yes, people are exhausted and some would rather look away, we have another step. It's not a criminal probe, I want to be clear with you. It is not as if they've fired up a new special counsel to go after the old special counsel. Nothing in these first pieces of news suggests that there would be any jail time on the table for anyone, no matter what they find. And yet, on the other hand, it is a step, which all experts say is suspicious, to go investigate the investigators. We're back with Andrew Eisman, former FBI general counsel and a Mueller probe deputy head of that probe and prosecutor. Your view of what it means to have what I explained is a workplace, civil, and minor review, the Hatch Act of Jack Smith, but still looks a lot like the revenge that Trump ordered.
You know, if this was the very first time that there was a review, I would say, you know what, you should have it. We were aware when I worked on the Mueller investigation that there would be a time that the investigators would be investigated. And if that's what's necessary so that the public understands that we did our job, so be it. But here, Donald Trump and his conspirators actually had their day in court. They filed motions about something called selective prosecution. And every judge who reached the merits of those motions, including Eileen Cannon, who Donald Trump himself is very laudatory of, rejected the claim that these were selectively prosecuted cases. And so I think there's really nothing to it, and this seems very duplicative. It also is incredibly ironic for this administration of all administrations to be undertaking an investigation involving the Hatch Act, which is, as you noted, is a civil statute. And Mark Meadows, the former chief of staff to Donald Trump, famously said, in light of a report that said there were numerous Trump administration violations of the Hatch Act, he said no one cares about the Hatch Act outside the Beltway. And so he was basically saying we ignore it with impunity. And so all of that suggests that this is very much retaliatory, but I really think it's a distraction and nothing will come of it.